bio, just so everyone knows who you are and how special you are. So this next session is going to be about an hour, maybe a little less, depending on how much we talk and practice. So Michael Baime is going to be leading a session that we're calling Mindfulness for Listening and Understanding Complex Emotions. Michael Baime is a physician. He's the director of the Penn Program for Mindfulness and the director of mind-body programs at the Abramson Cancer Center at the University of Pennsylvania. He started practicing meditation at the age of 8, meditation in the Tibetan Buddhist lineage in the 1980s, and founded the Penn Program for Mindfulness in 1990. Since then, the Penn Program has trained over 20,000 individuals in an immersive 8-week mindfulness program that was designed by Dr. Baime. He is widely recognized for his innovative educational programming, his interactive and engaging presentations, and his effective adaptations of traditional meditation techniques to meet the challenges of modern life. Welcome, Michael. So I guess the other thing is, I think background about our relationship. I have done many of your classes, and you have several different things going on. You have the mindfulness classes that happen at Penn, and then you also have a monthly meeting that happens you've been running for 20 years, and it's really incredible. And I think what I've noticed is that you are able to bring in some of these more simple mindfulness techniques for people who are beginners, and then also lead people into some of these other types of practices that often feel very difficult, but that you just make them feel easy, whether they're less focused attention and more open awareness, or different types of meditations to learn how to actively listen. And in some of your classes, you have people pair up and do active listening exercises, and I found those amazingly helpful. Just trying to listen to someone without having to respond to them and just be as present as possible. I think it's been really game-changing, life-changing for me. So thank you for sharing those practices, and I'm hoping that we can, even after today, bring you back and have you, maybe we can do break up into pairs, and you can teach us some of those team exercises, because I think they're extremely powerful. And we also come from similar lineages in the Tibetan tradition, so I think that's also important to note, at least from my point of view. So I guess I wanted you to talk just a little bit about maybe how meditation can help us learn to listen in the context of what's going on, and a lot of the questions revolving around how to be a white ally for Black Lives Matter, and like, what does it even mean? What does it feel like, and what does it mean to listen? And also, I think a lot of people are dealing with lots of different emotions now, like anger, frustration, confusion, maybe depression, grief, and I've heard many people saying that they feel kind of paralyzed, like they don't know how to move forward, and it just feels like overwhelming. And curious to hear from you just how meditation can help us sort through some of that complexity. Not easy questions, but give us some answers over here.
Okay, let's see. Well, let's talk about listening for a little bit at least, and then talk about meditation a little bit. And I don't have a gallery view where I can see all the participants, so.
So because it's a webinar, you actually can't see them. It's so people can watch on Facebook Live, and they can watch on Zoom. And so I can pull people in to ask questions if we want, or I can read you questions that they ask. But right now they don't exist as videos.
They don't exist.
No, they don't exist. Not as video people.
Buddhism for a long time, I guess, and they've realized it. Good for them. Can they chat to me?
They can, yeah. So in the Zoom chat box, there's they can write to all panelists or to all panelists and attendees, and they can put questions. And Facebook Live also has questions coming in, but it's quite delayed. So we're mostly going on the Zoom questions, but I can relay any other questions I see.
Okay, well, so for anyone out there, even if I can't see you, if you're curious about something or you want me to um, clarify uh, anything that I say, feel free to chat. I won't necessarily uh, be able to answer all the questions, and I'll miss some questions because I won't be paying that much attention to the chat. But please put your comments up, and it'll help me because I don't know you. And there's a lot that we could talk about. You know, on the one hand, when Hannah asked me to do this, I said, wow, to provide a meditation practice that lasts an hour for people who aren't used to that is really kind of stressful and probably not so helpful if it's not your regular thing to do. It just gets boring. But when she told me what she wanted to talk about the topics, I'm thinking, oh, only an hour. Geez.
We can have you back.
I
Don't
don't know
worry.
if
Next
that would
week.
work. So let's start with communication, because it's an interesting place to start, because communication is what we're not doing in our world, in our culture. I don't think we do it very well in our personal lives. And we don't do it very well with ourselves. And I may be using communication in a larger sense, and it can really be applied and as somewhat of a metaphor. But the truth is that we're out of touch. First of all, we're out of touch with ourselves. We don't feel even what we really are feeling, which is a funny thing to say, but we're so quick to shut down sensation or emotion that would be uncomfortable. We look away so quickly that we miss an awful lot of what we are. We miss a lot of ourselves. And we aren't aware of the process of blocking or shutting down feeling or emotion. And it's understandable why that happens. There's no blame, and it's not as if we're doing something wrong or bad. We're doing something that gives us a benefit, which is not feeling discomfort, which everybody wants. Every creature that's ever been wants to minimize discomfort, and we're no different than that. It's human. It's it's not just humans though that feel that way, but it, it creates difficulties for us because we shut down feelings that really need to be heard. The same thing is true with our thoughts. We are constantly thinking. We're constantly thinking. And if you doubt that, if it's not completely obvious to you that your mind is one constant continuous monologue that started at about the time when you became able to speak, and probably before, but who knows, all you have to do is sit in meditation for 15 minutes and watch what happens. And some of you I know have practiced meditation before, and so you're familiar with the truth, which is that our minds kind of have a mind of their own. And we think that we are thinking our thoughts, but actually our thoughts are kind of thinking themselves, and we don't notice. But what happens, both because we don't feel and because we're in the midst of this constant self-referential monologue, is that we're out of touch with the world, with ourselves and the world. So when we talk to somebody, like you probably think that you're a good listener, like I think that I'm a good listener because everybody thinks that they're a good listener. And it's those other people who don't do such a good job. But all you have to do is to watch what happens, to really get curious and watch what happens when you talk to someone and listen to them. And I bet, now you may be different, but I bet for most of us, and I'm talking about me here, what happens is that we pretty quickly figure out what we think that person is going to say. Whether we're right or not is another question, but we figure it out, and then we start planning what we're going to say. So our attention has left that person and has gone in here. And we're like, and we're still paying attention to them in a way, because we probably have decided what's most important to us. And then we're waiting for them to pause to take a breath. So we can say what it was that we decided was important. And we're not fully present. And that isn't real listening. Now it is true that you can listen that way and you can get the narrative. I had someone in one of my classes, this is a long time ago now, who came in after a unit on listening. And he said, he said, I get this now because I was listening to my wife and she got upset with me and she said, "You're not listening to me." And he said, and I had been listening to her, and I actually was able to tell her everything that she had said for like the last 2 minutes. And he said that she just stared at him, and she said, "I didn't say that you could repeat what I said word for word. I said that you weren't listening." And what that means is that there's this quality of presence and contact, of awareness that meets the unconditional experience of another without the grid or the separation that comes from having mental events intercede, interpret, judge, react to, conceptualize, plan for, like all of that stuff that happens in our head could be put aside, and we could just come to face that person and feel them and sense them and know them through a direct knowing that doesn't really require the addition of our interpretations and judgments. And so we would have a more direct experience of that person. And if we were able to do that while making contact with what was happening in here, while feeling what's actually here, we would find that there's a lot going on that we don't notice because we're too distracted. There's too much going on in our head, that we would feel for that person, and we might have more complicated feelings. When we make contact with bare attention, when we just meet another person as they are and feel what's here, then we have the possibility of empathy. And empathy, the root of empathy comes from a Germanic word. It's one of those compound words, like words are in German, and it means feeling into someone else. And where that happens is here. It doesn't happen like out there. It's not like we're actually feeling that person really, but there's something about being human and attending to another person fully that evokes a similar emotion in us. So mindfulness is about learning to pay attention. That's all that it is. It isn't about attaining, well, maybe it is. I was going to say it isn't about attaining a state of bliss, but if you try to do that, it's not going to happen. In fact, if you try to create any emotion, sensation, experience, or create a belief, you'll find that you can't really do that. I mean, we could say that the sky is falling, but that doesn't make us believe it. And we could say that we're going to feel joy, but that doesn't make it happen. What we meet is that person as they are, and what we feel is our genuine, unedited response to that from that meeting. And so when we feel into someone else, it happens here, but it has something to do with what's happening there. And this is how attention builds a bridge between us and other people. Mindfulness, because it trains and stabilizes attention, helps us to get out of the way and to experience the other, that person, whoever it is and whatever relationship they have to us, more simply. I could pause here because that's a long answer. Hannah, do you want to direct or redirect?
No, I think that's great. It's really helpful. I guess I would love to maybe have you talk about just what sorting out different layers of emotion and how meditation can help, and maybe lead us through whatever you feel like leading us through for however long you feel like.
Wow, that's an open invitation.
I mean, not 12 hours, but.
Do I have to finish by July, or can we? Well, it's a complicated question, and there's a lot that, just like with communication, that we could say about it. Our relationship to our feelings is really complicated. Although the strategies that we have for managing them are more simple. We push them away because we don't like them, or we pretend that they're not there because they're inconvenient or unwelcome. So, oh no, I'm not upset. No, I'm honestly not upset. Or maybe the most difficult for others, at least, is that we discharge them. We're angry and we have a tantrum. And that very blunt approach to emotions doesn't serve anyone well. We don't feel them fully. We're trying to get rid of them, or maybe we're grasping after them if they're pleasant emotions. I didn't add that. And we experience the emotions as a single thing. I mean, certainly, Hannah, as you know from your training, and as I guess, you've all experienced, everyone here has experienced, our emotional lives are kind of complicated. And emotions are textured and nuanced and layered. So that you might feel angry. And then if you would, during meditation, or just as you go about that moment, as you're in that moment, you might slow down enough to feel into it a little bit. And you might find that what you really feel is hurt. And that anger is actually easier to deal with and on the surface. And then if you had the time, or it was a pattern that you were used to seeing, you might feel into it further, and you might see that underneath the hurt, you're actually mostly ashamed. And then even underneath that, there might be something that's more like a fear of maybe a fear of not being good enough, or not being up to it, or maybe just a fear that you'd be hurt. And they all happen quickly. It's just like, boom. It's they're all there. And meditation is so helpful for this, for working with this, because when you're meditating, the thing that's happening is nothing. The only thing that's happening is you. There you are, you and yourself. Whatever comes up as a response to something that had happened, that something is over. And the only thing that's left there is you. And once you actually realize that they're not making you feel that way, but that you're just feeling that way, sure, there are reasons, but nobody can make you feel anything. You feel it. And when you start to see that, or at least get curious about what's going on inside those things that we call feelings, and start looking at it more closely, we see this complexity. And when it's just us there, there's nobody else to blame. And we get to look at it in a less reactive kind of a way. And we have all the time in the world, or as long as you're willing to sit there for and experience this. And so you can look at it as closely as you want. We think about meditation as focusing on something. And that's my belief about it, that it's always about focusing on something. And we think that we should be focusing on the breath, or focusing on a mantra, or focusing on sensation in the body. But actually, you could just focus on what's here. The thing that matters is the steadiness, the stability, and the clarity of your attention in that moment. And whatever it is that you're focusing on is just kind of the prop to help you to do that. There's nothing special about the breath here. I mean, after I'm done, you'll have a chance to experience breath work. Very different way of experiencing breath, very powerful and helpful. But this way of noticing breath isn't about the breath. It's about using the breath to help us attain stability and clarity so that we see what's here. And when I say see, that's actually not what happens. It's feel when we talk about emotions. I can talk about, and I teach a course at Penn that goes into great detail about the neuroscience of this. So I can tell you which brain regions, allow you to modulate emotional reactivity, and which part of the brain helps you to sense these visceral sensations, the feelings, even before they really become fully embodied and clarified emotions. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that we're willing to sit down and meet them as they are. And so meditation helps us to clarify this complexity. And also, as we keep looking at it, as we look at anger and fear and shame and hurt and doubt and self-judgment and self-criticism and whatever else it is that our thoughts and feelings send our way, we begin to have a perspective on it. It's as if they don't stop happening. They'll never stop happening. You don't want your emotions to go away, even the unpleasant ones, I think. Mm-hmm. They're the palette of your life. They are your life. You can have a lobotomy if you don't want to have emotions. But your stance towards them shifts so that you're able to witness them while still feeling them, but not react to them. So people who write about meditation call this decentering. I mean, you could call it metacognition. It means cultivating the capacity to step back from getting all tangled up in the thoughts and emotions and stories and beliefs and just holding it. And when you get better at that holding, what you really start to see is that you're holding yourself, and that it's possible to do that with kindness and warmth and love. And if you can practice that, when you can practice that, it gets a lot easier to offer that to other people. And so you feel more love. One more thing about emotions. I don't know if this has come up before, and I don't want to repeat what's been said, but a lot of prejudice, a lot of bias, and a lot of the situation that we find ourselves in now with regards to racism and the perpetuation of injustice happens because good-natured, well-intentioned, well-meaning people like me, like everyone, has biases that aren't fully in awareness, that we have unconscious biases that lead us to judge classes of people, ages of people, genders, through distortions with judgments that are kind of built into our system that we can't see. And so this kind of self-awareness that comes from meditation is really, really helpful in finding biases that you may not be aware of. It's also helpful to have specific training so that you understand what kind of content to look for and to hear other people talk about their experience of that. It's very helpful. I just did that kind of a training. But it ultimately what matters is your willingness to look openly and your ability to see clearly.
Right. And so just to clarify, in terms of feeling emotions, where meditation isn't to push them away, but to provide a container for them. I think that this is for beginner meditators, there's often the question of, am I focusing on my breath to push everything else away? Or am I single pointed attention so that I can suppress other things? And are some meditations about that? And if so, is that beneficial in its own way? Or are they all about like feeling your feelings or getting grounded in what's actually happening?
I'm really glad you brought that up, Hannah. It's complicated. You may have emotions that are too much. You may flood with emotions. You may have had trauma. And if emotions create too much instability, if they're overwhelming, it's really not helpful to feel that. That's not what you need. Actually, what you need is distance from that. So then you use the breath, you use the ability that you have been cultivating to focus on something else that's not that emotion. It might be to find a grounded feeling in the body. It might be to focus more closely on the moment by moment sensation of the breath. And wherever it is that you direct your attention, it is away from that emotion. It isn't suppressing it, although suppression, contraction happens automatically. It's like if you put your hand on a hot stove, you'll pull your hand away before you decide that you should pull your hand away. And when something comes up that's that destabilizing, we push it away really quickly. But the goal here is to relax the systems that do that kind of suppression, but to let that emotion kind of go its own way, let those thoughts go their own way, and focus the attention on something that is comforting or stable and that can provide something of a safe harbor. And we can do both those things in practice. You know, I was distracted there. I lost your question because I see that someone in the audience who sent me a text was at a 3-month meditation retreat with me in 1983.
Nice. I was wondering what that meant. I was like, is that when that person graduated?
Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Hi, John.
You've been around for a while, huh?
We go way back.
Nice.
Yeah, we were at a retreat with my root teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, in
Oh, wow.
Bedford, Pennsylvania, in 1983. I actually,
Wow.
I was a resident, a training, and I managed to get a 3-month leave of absence. Wow, that was good. Yeah. Anyway, so I don't want to get past my my time boundary.
Yeah, I think we can go to till 5:15 if you want to, do a little practice and don't feel rushed because things are flexible.
Sure. And I'd like to at least have a moment to see if there are any questions from whatever we do.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll suggest, that we'll do a traditional sort of a standard meditation practice for, let's say we'll focus on the breath. I mean, I thought I might use the sensations of the body, but since we had all this discussion of emotion, we'll start with focus on the breath, and then we'll include some other things in our practice. We'll expand the focus a little bit to other sensations and things that we could notice. And then we'll feel emotions if they're there. You know, the funny thing about emotions is that when you go looking for them, they are kind of shy,
Yeah.
and they tend not to show up. But that's okay. Then you can feel inadequate and like you're a failure because you're not having emotions, or frustrated or irritated at me or whatever. There'll be something there if you're willing to sort of turn around and look at it. Probably.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take my video down, and when you're done with your part, I'll pop back in to just say like,